Well, happy Sunday, Coastway Church. It is good to see you. We are currently walking through and working through the 10 commandments. And so if you want to go ahead and open your Bibles up to Exodus chapter 20, we're going to be in a couple of places today, Exodus 20 and Genesis chapter 2 as well. But we're going to start in Exodus 20. We're going to end in Exodus 20 just to keep it really simple. And here's one of the things about the 10 commandments that I think really is a misconception. And that is that the 10 commandments is actually about slavery. Majority culture would say that any God who would tell you what you have to do or it's like all these rules, it's like that's slavery. I don't want to be restricted. I don't want to be limited by some God who won't let me give like full like expression to my individualism. And I think that there's so many lies just this packaged within that narrative. And one of those that I want to expose, and we're trying to say this every single week as we're walking through the 10 Commandments, because what is the 10 Commandments? It's the greatest code of ethics that's ever been given in human history. And that's because it comes straight from the heart of God. And it's for his people. But the 10 Commandments are actually about freedom, not about slavery. So the whole context is God has set his people free before he told them anything that they need to go out and do to get his acceptance, to get a covenant relationship with him. And so it's like, you've been set free, now go and live free. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to give you a guide. I'm going to give you even a gospel that is going to help you live and relate as people who have been set free. And where we're going with the commandment today, it's the fourth commandment, keep the Sabbath. And one of the areas where we still feel very enslaved, and this is why this is in the 10 Commandments, is when it comes to how busy we are. We're all so busy. We're all battling busy. We're all figuring out, how do I integrate all of the things that are in my life that's expected of me, that's required of me? And I want to show a picture to you guys. I saw this on Instagram. There's this guy, he like does all these like circus acts. I don't know if you can see this or not, but he's on this huge unicycle and he's juggling. And I think sometimes I look at that right there and I'm like, that is my life. It's like it feels like a circus act trying to keep everything going at one time. And most, I would say, you can relate to that. You would say, like, how in the world am I going to be able to do all of these things and get all these things done? We're so busy. And I just want to lead with vulnerability today and let you know that what we're talking about is a struggle for me. You know, don't let that shock you. I am pastoring and I'm preaching in the midst of my own sanctification. And I try to say that often because this is something that God is working on with me, and I want to invite you to work on this with me and us work on this together, because here's what I'm really praying and pursuing, what Victoria and I, what our family want to do, is we want to integrate our commitments in a way that is commendable. We want to integrate marriage. We want to integrate parenting. We want to integrate leading and pastoring through the early, chaotic days of starting a new church. And you know, even having a personal life. How about that? We want to integrate all these commitments in a way that is commendable. And today, what I'm really looking to do is to invite you into that. And if I were to ask you the question, how are you doing? Isn't it interesting that that's the question we ask? A better question is, how are you being? But we are human beings, not human doings. And yet our fast-paced, frenetic, get it done, get to the top of the charts, productivity, success, all these things, ambition, it's turned us into human doings instead of human beings. And I think that the invitation of the Sabbath is recover your humanity. Be before you do instead of doing so that you can be. And that's the refreshing news of the gospel. But if I were to ask you how you're doing, honest question, you would probably say good, just really busy. And I'll be that guy. I'll ask the question, are good and busy supposed to always go together? Like, is that really the way that God created us to operate? Because here's the reality. Jesus was busy. So busy is not bad in and of itself. I think the virtue of busy is located in the motive of busy. So Jesus was busy, but here's the difference between him and us. He was never in a hurry. So you look at Mark chapter 5, there's this really important guy, his daughter's sick. He says, Jesus, please come. Please heal my daughter. You are her only hope. And so he comes. I would imagine he probably had a brisk pace. They were probably moving very purposefully. But he gets interrupted on the way, and he allows himself to be interrupted on the way. Isn't that countercultural? Isn't that inside out? And he ends up getting there, and he ends up serving more people by being interruptible and not being in a hurry. Or I think about this moment in Luke chapter 10, Mary and Martha. And Martha's, the person who's like getting all the stuff done and making the meal and cleaning the house and like kind of ordering and organizing the group that's been invited over. And then Mary, she catches a bad rap. She's over here. She's just like listening to Jesus. Like, what are you doing? We need to get the table set, Mary. It's like, get off your blessed assurance and come over here and help me with a little bit of this, okay? And Jesus commends Mary, and he convicts Martha for being busy in a way that's hurried. I think about Lazarus, one of Jesus' best friends. We talked about that in the previous series, Anything is Possible, John chapter 11. You can go read that. But his best friend is at the doorstep of death, and Jesus finds out about it, but he stays multiple days longer in the place where he was. It's like, what's that about? Well, he had a purpose. He knew what that purpose was. He was busy, but he was never in a hurry. He ends up getting there, and it's for the glory of God that he waited, because it gives everybody there a picture of resurrection life. Think about Mark chapter 4. Jesus is asleep in the bottom of a boat when there's this raging storm. He's taking a nap, you guys. Like, how many of us can even like fall asleep with everything that's going on? It's hard, right? It's hard. Jesus is taking a nap, and like the world's tumbling down, and his disciples are all like panicked, and he wakes up, and he's like, yawns, wipes the sleep from his eyes, be still. And that's the invitation of the Sabbath, straight from the heart of Jesus, straight from the Ten Commandments. It's to be still and to trust that God cares, that he's in control. And so what do we know? All the busy is not really making us better, because distraction is up. Depression rates. 1 out of every 3 people are depressed. You look to your left, you look to your right. If you don't see it, it might be you. 1 out of every 3 people. Anxiety is at a record high. If you see anybody from the age of 10 to 25, you can make a safe assumption they're very anxious. The world is coming at them very fast. And you might hindsight, if you've made it through those difficult, confusing years, be like, oh man, I remember when I was your age, this is what it was like. And it's like, well, you didn't have to deal with TikTok. School shootings weren't normalized when you were that age. The LGBTQ movement had not confused so many elements of being in relationship. And you got to interact with this, and you're like, okay, maybe I should be a little more patient. But there's a lot of anxiety there. There's a lot of addiction that's going on. And that's what busy is doing to us, by the way. We're up on what we should be down on. We're down on what we should be up on, and we feel more like human doings than human beings. And in a world that is enslaved with busyness, where do we turn for freedom? And I don't think anybody would just like go, I know where we're going to turn for freedom, the 10 Commandments. When was the last time you actually said that whenever you felt like totally anxious or overwhelmed? It's like, I need to go to the 10 Commandments. We don't think that way. Part of that's because we think culturally more than biblically, but the 10 Commandments actually has a placeholder for busy people to rest and rejoice in what truly matters. It's the 4th commandment, Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 through 11. Let's get going. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male servant or your female servant or your livestock or the sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. You're like, what's the contemporary significance of all that? Let me give it to you in one sentence. This is where we're going today. This is what the whole day is about, is that the Sabbath is a God-given rhythm that frees us to rest and rejoice. The Sabbath is a God-given rhythm that frees us to rest and rejoice. You don't get this with any other god, by the way. All other gods, the gods of Canaan, the gods of Egypt, that the people of Israel had grown accustomed to or would step into with the promised land, they demanded nonstop sacrifice. Nonstop sacrifice so that there was never a moment where you could pause and you could be reminded that everything falls under God's sovereign care and control. Therefore, I can go to sleep. Therefore, I can take a nap. Therefore, I can enjoy myself and not stress and not speed and not worry. I can worship. I want to share another picture with you. These are our two wonderful kids out on the beach, and I want to tell you a little bit about what's going on right here because you see that they're in a kiddie pool, right? Okay, so let's just think about that kiddie pool. Those are limits in an otherwise limitless setting. You got the ocean, you got the sand, and yet somehow, some way, this little guy who has my complexion, bless his heart, and then this delightful beauty over here who has Victoria's complexion, good for her, she stepped out of the ocean and into Elliot's limits so that he could have a really good time and he could enjoy life through the limits. Because he has more limits that she doesn't have whenever he's out in the sun, if you know what I'm talking about. And so she stepped out of her limits into his limits so that he could have a better time through his limits. That's what the Sabbath is about. It is about an unlimited God stepping into our limited being and showing us what it looks like to rest and rejoice even though we can't do it all. So the word Sabbath comes from the Hebrew word Shabbat. I won't make you repeat that after me, but I spent a long time trying to figure out if I pronounce it the right way, and I still don't know if I got it right. But Shabbat means stop. Okay, when was the last time somebody said stop? And said it in a way that was loving, didn't say it in a way that was correcting. That's what God's doing right here. It's a day to stop working, worrying, speeding, stressing, and to rest. It can also be translated as delight. And so the Sabbath is an entire day that is set aside to rejoice in God's good gifts and to rest in God's good work. I love the way Bible teacher John Mark Comer puts this. He says the Sabbath, I love this. I need to put this on a frame. It's a delivery system for life. It is intended to give you life, not take your life. And I would be, if you ask our daughter Eleanor, she calls it a day where you go to the pool, get off your phone, and don't do any work. I feel like that's fair. All right? It's like we're trying to give her some biblical principles right here. But what the Sabbath is, it's a timely practice that we all need. And to see the full vision and value of the Sabbath, I want to take us back to the beginning. We're going to go to Genesis chapter 2. It's going to be on the screen. If you don't want to dog ear Exodus 20, you can just look on the screen. Or you can do that, and we'll come right back to Exodus 20. But we're going to be in Genesis chapter 2 for just a moment. And I want to show you how the Sabbath is rooted in creation. It's rooted in God's loving character, not some restricting rule. Because God didn't look out and say, oh, they're doing a lot. Man, they need a day off. They're wearing me out just watching them working so hard. How would I ever get this done without them? Things God doesn't say. He said, rest is not just what I do, it's who I am. It's what I give. And so as the source of all rest, I desire my image bearers to rest with me. And so the appeal is to our identity as men, women, and children who are created in the image of a delightfully restful God. He works and he rests. And so before we get into the command of the Sabbath, which is in Exodus 20, we need to see the creation of the Sabbath, Genesis chapter 2, verse 1. Thus, the heavens and the earth were finished. God finishes everything that he starts, by the way. That's one of the reasons why we need him in our life. All the host of them. And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. You notice, and we're going here, John 19:30. I'm going to share this a little bit later in the sermon. You notice how Jesus echoes creation whenever he cries from the cross in complete salvation? It is finished. What is finished? the reordering, the renewal, the restoration of what once was from the foundation of time. And now this right here, this will hurt your head when you start thinking about it, but I'm going to do it to you, all right? Because I've been sitting with this all week. Why is God resting? That's a deep idea, right? And I'll give you a hint. It's not because he's tired. It's not because he's over it. It's because he's modeling for us what a healthy life looks like. So if you think about it, man was created on the sixth day. God rested on the seventh day. And so by this point, we've done nothing except watch God rest. And here's why this is important. The first thing that Adam sees when he opens his eyes, when Adam and Eve, they look and they see a God who's not worried. They see a God who's not demanding. They see a God who's resting and delighting in their being, in their community, and in their purpose. And here's why this is important, and this is why I believe that this, again, I think this is the deep idea right here. Because how does a kid learn things in life primarily? Watching mom, watching dad. Most impressionable creatures on the planet. And we're going to talk about that here, I think it's next week, the fifth commandment. Honor your father and mother. So come back for that. But we watch our parents, and that is how we take on their character. And so Adam, the first thing that he sees his heavenly parent doing is resting, and he's watching this, and he's learning, is like, that's the way I'm supposed to live and relate. And the first thing that he ever saw the Father doing is the very thing that we have such a hard time doing. It's an image that we can hardly see, because if we would actually see this picture of God, who's at rest, not cracking the whip or having all these rules and requirements and being so rigid, it would change everything about how we live and relate. And so we're 2 chapters into the Bible, and we can see the central message of the Bible. God's work gives us rest. Can I tell you, the best rest begins with God's work, not your own. We see this in creation. What is creation? What did we do to make all this happen? We took the raw materials of everything that God gave to us and we cultivated it, but we didn't create any of it. We just took everything in it. And so creation is a gift. It's a grace. What did we do to contribute to our salvation? The sin that made it necessary. But there's a heart that comes from God that says, I've got a never stopping, ever loving, always pursuing, unbreaking love for you. And so he pursues us to the cross, and he purchases salvation so that we can be bought back and brought back into his presence, as we see in Eden. That's a gift. That's a gift. That's grace. And you know, there's no part of God's acceptance of you that started with you, but with the sinless life, the substitutionary death, and the triumphant resurrection of the King of creation, God in Christ. And I want to tell you, it's by faith in his finished work that you are fully forgiven and free from all shame. And what are the hardest words for us to believe in the Christian life? Well, it's the message of the Sabbath. It's the reality of the Sabbath. It is finished. Why do we not Sabbath? Because we don't believe it is finished. Why do we go on sinning? Because we don't believe that it is finished. We don't functionally trust it. Intellectually, yeah, I get it. You know, I grew up in church or whatever, or I read and know my Bible, pastor, so I'll have you know I do get it, that it is finished. But hey, listen, let's let our hair down a little bit, be honest. Do we functionally trust that it is finished? Did you functionally trust that it is finished on the way to church this morning? Will you functionally trust that it is finished as you go about those annoying things in your week, those disappointing things in your week, those discouraging things in your week that are coming for you? That's what we're talking about right here. And so there's a better way. Verse 3, we see, so God blessed the seventh day and made it holy. That means set apart. Because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation. So here's the idea right here. God worked hard for 6 days, then God rested well on the seventh day. And that's the Sabbath pattern that we see embedded in the DNA of creation. Work hard. Work hard. Rest well. Labor leads to leisure. But here's the difference between us and God, and this is why we're not God. I know that this is humble pie for us, but here's a slice, is God has labor before leisure so that we could have leisure before labor. And that's the offer of the Sabbath for us. How should we think about the Sabbath? Well, there's two words that are commonly used to describe it. We see them right here in Genesis 2, and it's blessed and holy. So blessed, what does that word really mean? Well, get a biblical vision of blessed, and what we see is that there's only a few things that God blessed, humans and a day. He blessed us, and he blessed the observance of the Sabbath. And what was it that was so blessed about us as humans? Well, it was our ability to produce life. And that comes straight from the image of God, straight from the character of God. And so what does God say to his creation? Be fruitful and multiply. Carry the blessing forward. And what was blessed about the day? Well, what he's saying is that if you will re-enter the rhythm of rest one day each week, you will know life. But if you reject the rhythm of rest, you're going to feel like death. So there was a happiness study that was done by this doctor on who are the happiest people on the planet. And here's a plot twist. Guess who it was? Seventh-day Adventists. That's like a denomination within Christianity, So we believe, for the most part, the same things about the most important things, but we do have some differences. But one of the things that Seventh-day Adventists crush it on is the Sabbath. They keep the Sabbath. And here's what's amazing is this doctor realized that Seventh-day Adventists live on average 10 years longer. And guess what happens if you Sabbath weekly, how many days that accumulates to over the course of an average lifespan? 10 years. It's as if God knew exactly what he was talking about. So blessed. And then there's holy. You have these ancient Near East gods. They were found in the world of space, not time. And so you go to a holy shrine. You go to a pilgrimage to Mecca. You go to a Hindu temple. But if you want to encounter the living Creator God who loves you, who pursues you, who doesn't give up on you, you observe the Sabbath. He says, enter into my presence to rest and rejoice. And interestingly enough, Sabbath shows up in the rhythm of creation from the beginning, but Sabbath doesn't show up as a command until 70 chapters later. And here we come back to Exodus 20. I'm doing this to you, so go back to Exodus 20 if you turn to Genesis chapter 2. Well, here's what we see. We saw the creation of the Sabbath. This is the command of the Sabbath. So about 50 days prior to the giving of the Ten Commandments to the company of Israel, the Lord had freed Israel from slavery. And so what they needed is they needed a manifesto on how am I supposed to live and relate as a freed person because I've never known this before, nor have my ancestors known this. All they've known is slavery. And so God gives them 10 ways to live free called the Ten Commandments. And again, let's read Exodus 20, verse 8. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it, there's our word, holy. So the word remember is very important. Why do you think that's put there? That's because this is probably the only commandment that we don't really feel guilty about breaking. I mean, if you lie, if you lust, if you steal, if you cheat, if you borrow your buddy's Netflix password, it's like, oh wait, everybody has a different conscience on that. Okay, but you get the point. It's like you feel guilty about breaking commandments except for this one. And so God goes on, 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. So here's the thing, I do want to say this because some need to hear this. Okay, some need to slow down, others need to speed up. God doesn't just call us to rest, he also calls us to work. But he calls us to work from our rest, not work for our rest. And work is a very good thing, as we saw in Genesis, because it existed before the fall. There were two types of work in the garden, still two types of work today. Physical work, that go and cultivate the garden. Do that, Adam and Eve. And then intellectual work, name the animals. Could you imagine what that was like? This is a giraffe. This is an elephant. I just would love to have kind of like a 50-yard seat to how that all worked. But physical and intellectual work. And I will say this. I hope you like to work, because we're going to work in heaven. But here's the difference between the work that we'll do in heaven and the work that we do today. Work works with you instead of work working against you in the redeemed creation. You see, right now we're in the fall, and there's a curse that's put over work. Why is it that work is hard? Here's why work is hard. We see this in Genesis chapter 3. God says, work is going to feel like a curse instead of a blessing, and it's going to treat you the way that you treated me. And that's why work is hard. But every debt is going to be wiped clean, and there's going to be no trace of sin. There's going to be a glorified creation. And so work is going to work with us instead of against us whenever we get to glory. And as followers of the one who finishes everything he starts, we ought to be known as the hardest workers on the planet. Whenever the hiring manager, whenever the boss needs to make a hire, he ought to be thinking, where are those Christians at? They just work so hard. And they do it with a good attitude. And it's mind-blowing. So think about this. There are a few things that bring meaning to your life. Work is one of them. Work is one of them. I'm talking to myself right now. Maybe you need to hear this too. You can listen in. But think about this. What brings healing? Well, you could be a nurse, and you could bring healing. You could be a doctor. You could be a physical therapist. Or, for example, what helps to shape minds? Well, you could be a teacher. You could be an educator. So much meaning in that. What brings order from chaos? You could be a lawyer. You could be an engineer. You could be the admin on your HOA Facebook page. It's deep, dark waters. Be careful. All right. Very chaotic, needs a lot of order. We'll move on. And what we see is that the flip side of all this is how culture is pressuring us to like work a little too much, and to even turn us into what's called a workaholic. How do you know if you're a workaholic? You become emotionally numb. You don't really know what to do whenever you're not supposed to be doing work. And so your spouse points it out. But you just kind of go on, and you keep doing it. And here's what happens is, maybe you go to some escapist tendency because deep down, you're not really that fulfilled. You're not really that successful. You're numb. And so you go to binge Paramount Plus, and you binge some substance like alcohol, or you just aimlessly start buying stuff and shopping and going on Amazon. It's like, why do I need this? But it's a part of the escapist tendency to try to reassure yourself that there is rest, but you're looking in the wrong place. And that's why God keeps going in verse 10. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work. In other words, you should have a day that looks very different. That's what this is saying. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day, there's our word, and made it holy, blessed and holy. And of all the spiritual disciplines that we talk about in church, guess what the only one that rounds out God's top 10 is? It's not Bible reading. That's important, do that. It's not prayer. That's important, do that. It's the Sabbath. It's the longest and it's the happiest of all 10 commandments. The longest, if you pie chart the 10 commandments, the fourth commandment gets 30%. And then it's the happiest. It's the only one that is stated positively. It's like, why do we have to be told to do something happy? It's like, you go to the beach, or else. It's like, eat your ice cream. Nobody has to be told to do those things. But there's something inside us that makes us want to hurry our way through life and resist rest, which is a gift from God for us. So remember, rest is embedded in creation. And here's what I want to tell you. Here's a thought loop. We will Sabbath. We will. Voluntarily or involuntarily. Because here's the thing. If you break God's law, it will end up breaking you. You are fighting the grain of the universe. The last time society tried this was back in the French Revolution in the late 1700s, where there was a 10-day workday that was regulated, and it led to a public health crisis. You go with me to Conway Medical Center. Go to Grand Strand Medical Center. You're going to see people who are taking an involuntary Sabbath. You're going to see people in hospital beds who have heart problems because they never would slow down. They were overwhelmed, they were overworked, they were always anxious, and now needing surgery that costs a lot of money. But when you voluntarily believe God's law, it will end up blessing you. And I want to tell you this. Here's a principle that God gives to us. And what he's trying to do is he's trying to take us back to our limits right here. God is saying, I want to give you more by taking something away. I know it's counterintuitive. It's like, how does that work? When we try to function outside of our limits, it does what's called block the blessing. It blocks the blessing of enjoying more of God. It blocks the blessing of enjoying more of good. So this happens with relationships, and you know it. Who's had a really toxic, unhealthy relationship in your life at some point? And it's really hard, and it takes your life from you. And maybe it's a ministry, but there needs to be a boundary. And there has to come a point when you reorganize and reprioritize your relationships so that all of your life is not taken from you, because as men and women and children created in the image of God, we're called to be life givers, not life takers. And if all of our life is being taken from us from relationships, it's blocking blessing, and it's preventing us from the resting and the rejoicing that comes from the Sabbath. This also happens with money. The same principle is at work with Sabbath and generosity, or the tithe. It's like, would you like to have 100% without God? Or would you take 90% with God and believe that that's more? That's like the principle of the tithe, is bring the first fruits to God, and he will bless, and he will breathe on what you have. And you talk to those in our church who do that, you're just like, yes, it really is more blessed to give than it is to receive. It happens with work as well. Study after study shows that 50 hours a week, and then productivity plummets. 50 hours, that's 6 long, hard days. It's like, keep going. Past that, you're fighting God, you're blocking blessing. That's the command of the Sabbath. Next, we have the conviction of the Sabbath. A conviction is something you deeply believe in. This will be on the screen. What we deeply believe around the Sabbath is John 19:30, straight from the word and the mouth of Jesus and the cross of Christ. What is Jesus doing? He is restoring what once was. He's turning what's broken into something that's beautiful. On the cross, he cries, "It is finished." So Jesus worked really hard. Jesus resisted all of the temptations that nail our shoes to the porch. And he did it sinlessly, he did it blamelessly, he did it perfectly. And then he took our place on the cross. He traded places. It's the great exchange. He took our place, our sin debt, our Sabbath breaking, our rebellion, our dead religion onto himself in exchange for his righteous record. And so he gives it to us by faith. And he says, "It is finished." It is finished. And that's the conviction of the Sabbath. If I try to rest in my unfinished work, I'll be restless. I'll be anxious over that email. I'll be anxious over that house project that I didn't get done when the kids were just losing their mind. Or I'll be anxious over that social media post that I wasn't able to get out, or that deadline, or that spreadsheet, or that meeting, or that text, or that call that I got to get back to that person, and it's just crazy, and I never can get past it. And I'm anxious and I'm restless. But if I truly rest in God's finished work, I can rest. Because the earning is over. Approval is given. It is finished. I love the way that Chick-fil-A goes about this, right? Don't get your hopes up, they're closed today, all right? Need to clarify that. But they are the third most profitable fast food chain in the country. Behind McDonald's and Starbucks. But they're closed on Sunday, guys. You know, if there was like all this ambition there and like, oh, we're gonna show them. It's like, open up on Sundays, man. But could it be that they have emerged and they have thrived, even in the middle of COVID? Where did everybody want to go during COVID? I'm going to Chick-fil-A because nothing's changed. I'm going to Chick-fil-A because I'm going to get it like a categorically better experience. That's what everybody says, right? All right? Don't act brand new. You want Chick-fil-A right now. But it's the third most profitable. They keep the Sabbath. I don't know if you've ever been to Washington, D.C. and you've seen the Bible Museum. This is something that we want to do as a family at some point, but it's spectacular. Guess who bought that? The Green family, who funded that. The Green family who owns Hobby Lobby, who is closed on, as Kanye West said, Sunday. So there they are. And they're one of the most generous families on the planet. And why do you think they're so blessed? Why are they able to do so much good for so many people and have a great work environment? It's because, they keep the Sabbath. There is a connection right here. I love how one of my mentors put it, you need a day that looks different. If every day of your week looks the same, that's not what God has in mind. And so what does this look like in the Woods home? Well, let me just calm down. It's messy. It's really messy. Because as we're looking to integrate all of our commitments in a way that's commendable, that doesn't always go great. But what we try to do is we do try to have a day that looks different. We're figuring this out with you. And so I want to give you 3 Sabbath concepts that our family is pursuing. And I want to invite our church family to pursue together. So here's the first one. Have a weekly Sabbath rhythm. A weekly Sabbath rhythm. So where do we get the idea of a holiday from? Well, it's a holy day. That's what a holiday is. It's a holy day set apart from all others. And I've got good news. The Sabbath is literally a weekly holiday that we plan for with anticipation. You know how you plan for Christmas? I hope you plan for Christmas. You know how you plan for Thanksgiving? Just breathe easy. Take away all the family drama. Enjoy it once a week. Sit by the window and just be. That's the Sabbath. So here's what you do. Pick a day. When will we Sabbath? For us, it's Saturday. And so our family, that's, Sunday through Friday is just pour out. And it's nuts. And sometimes we're like, how are we going to do this? Oh, the Sabbath is coming. That's how we're going to do this. God's going to get us a reset on Sabbath. So we protect Saturdays. We really do. And I think that you need to protect your Sabbath whenever you set your Sabbath. It's like the oxygen mask. You get on the plane and they're like, hey, make sure that yours is on first, and then you can help other people secondly. The Sabbath is the oxygen mask, and we need it. Next, prepare ahead. Culture has its own vision of the Sabbath, and it's called a day off. And here's the deal. Sabbath will happen probably on your day off from work and or school, but it's so much more than just a day off. And here's what most of us do, is maybe we'll take part of or all of both of our days off, and we'll catch up on the work that we didn't get to the other 5 days of the week. But here's what I want to share right here is, what makes a day off a Sabbath? Here's what it is. It's that you're intentional before it comes. Why? So you can rest and rejoice when it comes. So here's what this looks like. Get the texts and the emails knocked out. Get your groceries stocked. Get your meals planned. Get your returns to wherever done. Knock out your homework. Get the chores and the housekeeping stuff done. Get it done or postpone it. The world will wait. Everybody will be okay. But pick a day, prepare ahead. And here's the thing. Sabbath does not and will not happen without a lot of intentionality and planning the other 6 days. We've tried it. It doesn't work. Okay, so let me save you the dumb tax right there. Okay, don't pay the dumb tax. It doesn't work. You got to plan for it. But Sabbath is more than just a day. It's a way. See, if you're just like, there's something called the Hillbilly 10 Commandments. By the way, I don't know if you've ever seen this before. I may share it at some point in the series, the whole thing. But basically, the Hillbilly 10 Commandments, the way that it says, like, honor your father and mother is like, honor your ma and pa. Well, that's helpful, right? And then the Sabbath Hillbilly Commandment is, get yourself to the Sunday meeting. Like, that's it. It's like, how did we reduce it to a gathering? It's so much. It includes it definitely includes a gathering, but it's nothing. It's not less than that. It's more than that. And you need a rhythm. Here's what you need. You need a rhythm. I wish I had time to get into this, but I don't. I'll give you the short version. You need a rhythm to recharge daily. So some outlet Husbands and wives work together on this. It's like, this is your 15 minutes over here, all right? And this is like your 15 minutes over here. If you've got young kids, you don't understand what I'm saying, okay? But you need to recharge daily. And then you need to recharge weekly. So that's the Sabbath, okay? But you also need to recharge annually. That's what we would call a vacation. What is a vacation? It is an extended holiday. It is an extended Sabbath where we are to rest and rejoice in the freedom that God gives us through the Sabbath. So next is, we need a rhythm for the Sabbath. Next is rest on the Sabbath. Sabbath literally means stop. You can't rest if you don't stop. I'm not, Captain Obvious up here, but stop doing the things that you're doing the other 6 days. And what helps us stop? Symbols help us stop. Okay, so you come to a stop sign, that's a symbol, and it tells you to stop. And so, again, just giving you my best stuff today, all right? So you come to a stop sign, you stop. You have a symbol for the Sabbath that helps you to stop and think about the Sabbath. So do something symbolic. Light a candle, cut a watermelon, cook a meal, get one of those, I hope I pronounce this right, charcuterie boards out, and enjoy that. Put your phones out of sight, out of reach. And here's what we do, and this has helped us a lot. This is called a Sabbath box, okay? We'll do a little show and tell today. You're glad you came to church, I know. And so this is a Sabbath box. And the Sabbath box is basically, it's a way to minimize distractions so that you can focus on the relationships that matter most in your life, starting with God and those closest to you. And so you actually can open this up, and you can put like a phone in there if you want to minimize that distraction. Or maybe if it's your laptop and you just want to symbolize it, you could put your phone charger in there, because my laptop will not fit in here. I've tried to put it in here. It doesn't fit. So, or maybe if you're like, I'm not going to do chores today, put a dish rag in here. Seriously. Or put something that you're going to stop in here. Maybe I'm going to put my credit card in here. Watch out. Or maybe put something that you're going to enjoy in here. Maybe, if you're going to go for a run, I don't know what you put in here. You get creative with it. But just have fun with it. This is something we do as a family. And this is the symbol that tells us to stop and enjoy, to rest and rejoice in the Sabbath. We have 2 of these available today. Discounted cost for purchase at the resource table. You can see Alan after the service. He'll be out there. And we have 2 of these available. We're also doing a giveaway on social media. So if you're not following us on social media, you can't get it. So now you know. All right? So I don't know. Number 3. That was funny, man. That was funny. Rest. Have a Sabbath rhythm. Rest on the Sabbath, and then rejoice on the Sabbath. Rejoice on the Sabbath. This is a good transition. This is the best part. So when you think rejoice, think recovering joy. I'm going to recover my joy, and here's how you do it. You rejoice in the gospel. Genesis 1 is creation. God's good gifts that we didn't earn poured out on us. That's the gospel. Exodus 20, that's redemption. God echoes the Sabbath, and he says, I bought you back out of slavery, and you didn't do any of it. So enjoy that. Enjoy how I worked so you could rest. And did you know that Jesus started his ministry on the Sabbath day? In Luke chapter 4, he opens up the scroll and he says, the year of the Lord's favor is here. The blind are going to see. The lame are going to walk. Captives are going to be set free. Why? Because I'm ushering in a new and eternal Sabbath, and you're going to taste and see that it's good. Did you know that Jesus was laid to rest in the tomb on the Sabbath? So his ministry started, and his ministry culminated on the Sabbath day. And then it was on the 8th day that he conquered sin, death, Satan, and hell, and emerged from the tomb victorious and triumphant. And he says, the Sabbath has come again. And so that's the 8th day. It's the start of a new week, and it was the start of a new creation. That's the gospel. So, hey, rejoice by getting yourself to the Sunday meeting, all right? Rejoice by gathering weekly and coming. Rejoice in God's word and responsive prayer. Rejoice by reflecting on the week. Say, God, where are you moving? I've been going at such a crazy pace. I've not even been paying attention to what you might want to do in my life. Or be like, this is where I'm at emotionally. I'm going to open up to you, God, and I'm going to open up to a close friend. And I'm not just going to be needed, I'm going to be needy. Rejoice by listening to music that lifts your spirit, that reminds you of the good and gracious God who never gives up on you. So rejoice in the gospel. Rejoice in his gifts. What is life-giving for you? Like, all right, do that. Figure out a way to do that. Couples, work together, not against each other, to make this possible. Like maybe you take a nap, maybe you have a board game, maybe you fly a kite, build a sandcastle, go swimming or a puzzle, unhurried time with a friend. Does that give you life? Go and do that. Go and be about that. We like on our Sabbath Saturdays, we'll do the Sabbath box, and then we'll cook a big breakfast. Bacon on the flat top, pancakes. It's beautiful. Can't wait for the Sabbath. So do something that you enjoy. What gift from God charges your batteries? Be about that. And again, if you're married, work together. Work together so that this can be a priority. Because ultimately, the Sabbath is not about a day, it's about a deliverer. 40 years after Exodus 20, Deuteronomy 5:15, you shall remember that you were a slave, and the Lord your God brought you out with a mighty hand. Therefore, keep the Sabbath day. So when you think Sabbath, you ought to think Savior. And the Sabbath, what is it in place to do? It is in place to point our hearts back to the one who saved us from what enslaved us. And you want to know what the modern day word is for slavery? It's addiction. And some of you have been rescued out of a life of addiction. Some of you are praying for those around you to be rescued out of a life of addiction. And it's awful. It's enslavement. Basically, imagine building your own prison and not being able to get out. That's what's happened right there. So the modern day word for slavery is addiction. And if you get around an addict, if you talk to an addict, what do they want? They want rest. Get me out of this. Why do I do what I don't want to do? Why do I keep going back to this? And I want to tell you, there's no rest in religion. Religion requires you doing a bunch of stuff for God in order for Him to do something in exchange for you. So you perform, you pretend, and it sends you on this crazy cycle of pride and despair. Pride when you're doing good, despair when you're not doing good. There's no rest in religion, and there's no rest in rebellion. What is culture doing? Turning sin into the Sabbath. And saying, I'm going to break God's commandments, and that's where I'm going to find rest. But you're working against the grain of the universe, and it's never going to go well. We know where this ends. There's only rest in relationship. Only rest in relationship. I hope you have someone in your life who fills your cup. I hope you have someone in your life who knows how to build you up and give you life. Married couples, be this to each other. Be this to each other. That person beside you is broken and sinful and often wrong, but so are you. Be this to each other. Fill one another's cup. But what is it pointing us to? The rest that we find in the relationship that comes fully and finally in Jesus Christ. And what does Jesus say? This is why He says in Matthew chapter 11, we're making sense of the Bible right here. Come to me, all who are weary and overwhelmed. And I'll give you what? I'll give you rest. I'll give you rest for your mind. Why? Because you can start thinking in a way as if it's already been resolved. That's what it is finished means. I'll give you rest for your body because you can start functioning in a way that's moving toward resurrection. And I know that I'm going to get a new body. I know that I'm going to get a new and renewed strength in the new creation when Jesus said it is finished. And it's going to give you rest for the heart. You know why? Because Jesus did everything necessary to restore you to Himself. And that's what the Sabbath is about. Why don't we rest? Why don't we rejoice in this God-given rhythm? Let me pray that would happen right now.